how this came to be is, one, I like writing. Two, I've written 2 books about how to do transformation. And 3, I'm always listening to everyone else's story. And I felt a need to tell my story because just for a change, A, because I think it's rather unusual, and B, because it has a happy ending. It's a story with a happy ending that shows that having chosen a spiritual life has really been a much happier life than having not chosen a spiritual life. So I wanted to write this book, A, to tell my story, and B, to let other people know that it's a journey that they might also be interested in going on. I hope a lot. I've actually written 1 chapter just on the challenges of being on a spiritual path. So 1 chapter looks at all the aspects of that. But I think what it can offer them, Matty, is that we can be on a path and we don't need to be part of a religion. We don't need to be a Buddhist or a Sufi. And we have the freedom to choose our own paths, because at different times in our lives, different things are relevant for us. For example, at a time in my life, Buddhist meditation was really important for me. It's less important. I do another kind of meditation now. But if I'd have stayed being a Buddhist, I would have stayed in the tradition of Buddhism, which I enormously respect, but I wouldn't have been able to move, which I feel I've been able to do, into the new kind of spirituality that I think is being born on the planet today. So I think that that's important, that a new spirituality is emerging, and we can choose it, because we need to be both the guide and the experiencer of our own journey. So we can choose people or experiences or therapies or spiritual practices or spiritual retreats that we feel we need at particular times. At least that's what I've done. I also want to show that it's okay to be lost, confused, and stuck in the Grail legend. The knight on his Grail journey, he gets stuck in the dark forest and cannot find any way out. And I want to show that, yes, it's okay to be stuck in a dark forest, and it's all part of the journey. I want to say that it's important that we trust our heart and that we work at opening and healing our hearts, because a lot of our wounds are in our hearts, but it's also our heart that allows us to be right-brained, because especially for men, too many of us are too much on the left side of the brain, that we only see the world through a rational, reductive, compartmentalizing, non-creative, non-empathic lens. And if we work at opening the heart, I think that we find all the best features of our humanity, our capacity to love, to feel joy, to feel courage, to feel awake and alive in the heart, so that the heart is a very, very important part of the spiritual journey, and we need to trust it, and it needs healing. And probably the best way that it can be healed is through transpersonal psychotherapy, which I work as a transpersonal psychotherapist. Excuse the noise, but there's traffic going on outside my window. Okay. The other thing that I want to stress is that how we feel needs, and how we evolve ourselves internally needs to be embodied in the way that we live. So Gandhi said we need to be the change we want to see. So this book is about how I've tried to live with integrity and simplicity and in kindness and generosity. I can't say I've succeeded, but I've tried to, because the inner and the outer both balance each other. So if we lead a balanced and harmonious outer life, it'll help our inner life to be balanced and harmonious. And similarly, if we work at inner balance and inner harmony, it will affect how we live our outer lives. So that is quite important, as it's also important to trust the process and to trust grace or help will be with us. I call the book Amazing Grace because I felt that there's a lot of grace or help that's been around in my life that has guided me, that has protected me, and that at times has given me powerful and difficult initiations to face. I think grace also can have a fierce side. I've just given a lecture on fierce grace, and you can find it on my website. But it's to trust that there's a helping process that is with us. I also stress that if we want to make progress, we need to work on ourselves. And most of us are only used to going out to work, not into work. So I show my own process of how I've gone into work and talk about how I do it. So I hope that this book will be useful for people who've worked with me, over the last 40 years, to see how I've actually done it, and that the way I've talked about transformation is actually the way I try to do it in my own personal life. The other point I want to make is that we need to be patient. It takes time to let go of patterns that have been with us for a long time, like old friends, and we get attached to them, even if they're suffering patterns. I think it was our spiritual teacher called Gurdjieff said that we're willing to let go of many things, but our suffering is often the thing we're least willing to let go of, implying that there's a certain attachment to suffering, and there's a certain attachment to life being the way it is and not working for us. So we need to live our lives in a way to be aware of what we want to let go of and what kind of life we want to let go into. And I think the last point here is that I made at the start, is that it's really worth making the effort to live spiritual life. I really call by that a deeper inner life, because there's too much about spirituality. It means you're spiritual if you go on a meditation retreat and you meditate 3 times a week and you do yoga. Doesn't necessarily mean it. I think a spiritual life is just a simple, ordinary life where we try to love our neighbors as ourselves. We try to treat animals on our planet with integrity, and we live simply and not glamorously. And I think that I've shown in my life, having started with a certain kind of outer opulence, which didn't make me happy in the slightest, that I've ended with an inner sort of abundance that has made me very happy in these last years of my life. So I think that those are some of the things that this book can offer if you're on a spiritual journey, Matty. I'm not a very organized person. I'm not a very structured person. But when I get into something, it kind of stays with me as a kind of obsession. So my main work is seeing clients and teaching webinars. So I would weave my writing around my clients and my webinars. But having ADHD, which I have, is an advantage in many ways. And one of the advantages is that things I'm interested in, I can concentrate for long hours on. So I can sometimes sit and write for 6 or 7 hours at a stretch and not feel tired and feel focused and interested. So that's really my routine process. I don't have a habit of getting up at a certain time and writing from X to X and then having, a rest and a snooze. I kind of do it from day to day. I was at university with Jeffrey Archer, who also has a house here in Mallorca, and we see each other because he was my captain of athletics, and he has a very rigid time for writing. Every 2 hours he writes and then he rests. I don't have that rigidity. I just go on until I feel like stopping. But I do make sure that I stay fit, and I do a lot of exercise every day. So I do exercise, so that's important. I could speak to my teenage self. I'd say be kinder to yourself and don't feel so driven. And don't feel you've got to compete with everyone and play the cool game. Because when I was a teenager, I was just concerned in trying to be a cool guy. And it gave me quite a lot of pain because I wasn't really a cool guy. So my advice is just stay with your process, enjoy what you're doing, find your inner truth, and don't always listen to what the grown-ups say. Find your own inner wisdom, and don't be too seduced by the media, and have the main part of your life be a not online life. Because I see so many teenagers living all their lives online. I'd also say this thing, and this comes from the codgery part of me, the old guy, is, I think it was Oscar Wilde who said, youth is wasted on the young. So I'd say appreciate the gifts and the blessings of what it is to be young and really get the most out of it. But I repeat again, don't spend too much of your life online, because that's an alternative reality. It's not a real world. So be in the real world do physical things, work at school, okay, play your sports, enjoy it, enjoy your friendships, but don't get too sucked in to the online media. I hope that they'll have enjoyed my story and not been too judgmental of me. And it's a good story because the angels win out eventually and the devils don't do so well at the end. So it's a good story. I feel there's a certain wholesomeness about this book. I'm just sort of looking at it. I'm just seeing all the Russell Brand hoo-ha that's going on at this moment. And I'm so glad that although in one way, when I was young, I was tall and charismatic, and was a bit naughty in many ways, I was never perverse in the way that he has been. And I'm very glad that I kind of lived, in a way, a naive life. A friend of mine said, "You're a little bit like the idiot in Dostoevsky's book," which I actually regard as an enormous compliment. I also hope that people will feel inspired to go for it in their own lives and to see difficulties not as blocks to stop us progressing, but as evolutionary opportunities. And I write a lot about that and how to deal with the different kinds of suffering that we inevitably come across in the course of our lives. 3, I hope that people will have a few good laughs, because I intersperse quite a lot of stories about my time at Oxford and the Bullingdon Club and the rather elite world I lived in as a little boy, and how though we had 14 servants to look after my father, mother, and me, and that world that I was brought up in of sort of opulence but soullessness. So I hope they'll see that I'm not against that world, but I've tried to move into a world that is more rich and more real and more truly abundant than the world that I was born into. And so to inspire people to realize that they can change how they want their lives to be, and that really we are the masters of our own destiny to a greater extent, not fully, but to a greater extent, that we can choose the kind of life that we want to live, to an extent. I hope that people will get a few key insights into sort of ways to deal with certain challenging situations, and that they'll realize how important friendship is and how important it is to make space in our lives to have friends and to enjoy friends and to work on our friendships, that I feel is very important, because essentially we're part of the whole of humanity. And so to see our fellow human beings as friends and to feel connected to them is very, very important. So I hope that that will come through. I also hope that what will come through is the importance of looking at and not running away from our dark or our shadow side, because we all have one. And by our dark or shadow side, I mean those parts of ourselves that are not particularly nice, quote, 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 unquote, about us, but that we don't know that we have. For instance, my dark side is not that I'm a bit lazy and a bit disorganized. I'm aware of that. That's not my dark side. It's not my shadow. It's in my awareness. My shadow is what I'm not aware of, and which I can often find in relationships. For example, in the book, I had to look a lot at my own narcissism and my capacity to be manipulative. And I needed to do a lot of work around these issues, both emotional work, i.e. psychological work. What was the origin of my narcissism? How is it connected to my background? But also I needed to do spiritual work so that I can evolve a self that is more than my superficial narcissistic self. And so I talk quite a lot about the need to integrate psychological and spiritual work together. And so I hope people will get something out of that, because I think that that's the work of the future. The spiritual work and the therapeutic work, I think, absolutely intertwine. And people who try to separate them would say, well, if you're spiritual, you don't deal with the personality because that's not who you are. Or people who are psychological who say you don't have to deal with the growth of your soul because you just have to improve your personality. That is also distorted. We need to both grow our soul life and grow our heart life at the same time as integrate and heal our personality or our egoic life. So it's not as if the name of the game is that we become non-egoic, but the name of the game is that our ego is no longer our boss, but it's more our servant. And what moves us is the deeper, more soulful parts of ourselves. I think that that's what I've tried to emphasize in my book. And in the last chapter, my epilogue, I talk about what I feel is going to happen in the future, which I feel will be challenging, but I feel we're going to make it in the end. And so I have a vision of hope and a better and a new society emerging out of the debris and the collapse of our own society. In other words, that I see a new world beginning to be born even now as aspects of our non-workable world are beginning to collapse around us as I speak. So I have hope for the future, and I hope that people will find this a positive and an amusing book and a good read and have fun with it.